We are live. It is a very, very gray Sunday, at least where I'm residing. This has been one of the coldest summers in San Francisco and the Bay Area as a whole. And I say I love it. I love warm weather. I don't like extremes on either end. The cold weather or the very, very hot weather. And I know eventually the fog comes in and all of that. But anyway, I only bring that up because of the fact that everybody here talks about the weather so much, even when we really don't have any kind of weather. But today I wanted to talk about the New York sports media. And I could talk about the New York regular media, but that would be far too easy in the point I'm going to make. And that is the Bay Area, San Francisco in particular, sports media versus New York. Now, look, of course, the New York sports media, number one, in terms of market size, in terms of, finesse and substance and everything's. Let's go down the line here, what I'm trying to say. You got baseball, you got basketball, you have hockey, you have obviously football, basketball. Now, the Mets are in town. They've taken two from your San Francisco Giants. And as I broadcast live on this Sunday afternoon, we're a few hours away from the Giants taking on the New York Metropolitans, as they are officially known as, on Sunday Night Baseball on ESPN. It's the ESPN game. Now, in the old days, I used to go out there and sit in the press box when the New York teams came in. I had a chance to meet Bill White and Phil Rizzuto. They were, of course, the Yankee announcers. John Sterling, got to meet him. But one of my most prized encounters, and I mean this sincerely, I am not a sniffer, as they say, jocks or anybody. We're all human beings, right? Some of us, make it to a point where we do whatever we do and become famous. But I've always had the feelings that look, we're all just the same. It's just some of us have persevered and done what we wanted to do. I got a chance to meet Keith Hernandez and Howie Rose and Ron Darling. And Howie Rose is the legendary, and I do mean legendary, radio play-by-play broadcaster for the New York Mets. Keith Hernandez started out as a pro baseball player from the Bay Area, from the peninsula. Big Giants fan growing up, and eventually became a Gold Glove first baseman with the Mets. Also had a stint with St. Louis. Anyway, he's now one of the color analysts for the New York Metropolitans. And Ron Darling, another analyst, also had a stint here in the Bay Area as a pitcher for the Oakland A's, was a pitcher for the Mets. Anyway, these two guys, Darling, most especially Keith Hernandez, and of course Howie Rose, great broadcasters. Keith Hernandez is just utterly fantastic. And on top of that, a very, very, very nice guy. And got to meet up with Keith a few years back, and it was just unbelievable. These are guys, they're not, as Howard Cosell would have said, part of the Jococracy. And that was kind of like Howard's really, really pungent wording for these guys that, and most of them are guys, that don't criticize. They used to be jocks. They're not very good behind a microphone, and they're rather boring, but for some reason, we all know why, the broadcast sports hierarchy hires ex-jocks because they think that they legitimize the broadcast. Some of them are putrid. Most of them are putrid. with the exception of Keith Hernandez, who is just fantastic. He's analytical. He is poignant. He is funny, has a very wry sense of humor. He knows the game, and he's very, very terrific. And those of you who have heard Keith Hernandez, those of you, and the same thing with Darling. Now, Darling, is just unbelievable. Used to be at ESPN, did some national games for TBS during the playoffs, and he's part of the Mets broadcast team. Howie Rose, again, a legendary broadcaster, only does the home games now on radio for the Mets. And getting back to Hernandez, these are all great broadcasters, and they're real solid. And they do all the things that you want. And they are homers, but you know what? They're also homers for the other teams too. They don't kiss butt on just the home team. Matter of fact, it's just the opposite. They're overtly critical of the New York teams, the Mets in particular. That's who they're broadcasting for. And it's a pleasure to listen to these guys because they're not afraid to criticize. And I'm not pitting them against the local announcers, Krukow and Kuiper. Look, I respect Krukow and Kuiper, respect Miller. I just think they become too predictable, and they're worthy of the Hall of Fame, of course. Now, Krukow and Kuiper are not in the Hall of Fame broadcast department yet. They probably will one day. Miller is. Dave Fleming, just kind of not my cup of tea. I think he's overrated. I think he's very solid. Don't get me wrong. And then you have the Schmendricks, the D-listers, when that's being charitable. You have F.P. Santangelo, who is just utterly garbage. And you have Chow, the crappiest, most boring, most benign vanilla bread, vanilla wafer, Kilpatrick's bread, Wonder Bread of announcers. And that's kind of the only comparison I will say is when the New York sports teams, particularly baseball and particularly the Mets, you put them up against the Miller crew. And I'm sorry, but I'm just gonna say it. What's on my mind? I think they're far superior. Don't get me wrong. I'm being honest, but I think Krukow and Kuiper are fine. Respect, absolutely. Admiration, no. And I know they're very popular and all that kind of said and all that. I just don't think they have the, shall we say, the expertise nor the gravitas broadcast-wise of the Mets broadcasters. Just my opinion, of course it is, and all that. And if you look as a whole, New York is so vastly superior. The writers, a few of them that still exist today, the broadcasters, the play-by-play guys, it's not even close. Dear Lord, it's not even close. Football, basketball. Of course, New York used to have on the NBA side Marv Albert. Yes, they had Marv Albert. We had Bill King. And Bill King, in my opinion, the greatest ever, especially for a guy that could do three sports like Bill King did, football, baseball. And in my opinion, his best sport was basketball, nonstop action, great wordsmith, great overall absolute craftsman was Bill King. Well, going back to baseball and the fact that the Mets are in town, and it's a shame that a lot of you probably don't or have not listened to. You probably have, so I'm kind of overgeneralizing here. Keith Hernandez, and Keith Hernandez is just terrific, and like I said, he knows what he's talking about. He's funny. These guys get into discussions and nothing having to do with baseball. Sometimes they make you laugh when there's something that they're trying to explain a point were doing their critical analysis of the game, they could get deeply engrossed. It becomes intensely listenable and interesting and provocative. All the while, they give you an absolute fantastic account of the game. And again, a lot of this is taste oriented. Everybody's got a different opinion or something, of course. And I'm saying, well, you might think, well, New York, Rich, New York is the number one media. Well, of course it is. That doesn't necessarily mean because you're the number one media town. And that's not just sports, that's obviously television, radio. It's the biggest city in America and all that. It's the number one market. That doesn't necessarily dictate that it has the best sports media around. But in this case, and even in this marginalized world in which we live, the writers, the broadcasters, the play-by-play guys for the respective teams are just fundamentally and absolutely, I mean, you can listen to it and see for yourself or watch, what have you. They're paramount to their teams, and New York is just so vastly terrific, and it's not even close to what we have left in the Bay Area, and that wasn't that case not so long ago. We used to have fantastic people. I've mentioned many a times Lon Simmons and Bill King, obviously, Don Klein, Hank Greenwald, Ted Robinson, um, people like that, just fantastic in the booth, descriptive, funny, engaging, and all that. Just fill in your own part of your own vocabulary. Compliments galore. Mainly because with Lon, you had a sense that this guy was national, was sort of bigger than the game in which he was describing. A lot of people didn't have a lot of fondness for Lon Simmons, thought he could be a little bit too negative, a little bit too, shall we say, sarcastic. Obviously, it's a matter of taste, and some people loved him. Most people did. Few people did not. I'm not crazy in any sense of the word, and I admit it, and I say it publicly, and have said it publicly about Bill. Well, Bill King used to broadcast the Raiders games and the Warriors. Obviously, at the end of his stint, life too, with the Oakland A's. And you talk about a Hall of Fame announcing crew with Bill King and Lon Simmons doing play by play in the A's when they were the great ownership. Haas family owned Oakland A's. It was just a pleasure to turn the radio on and listen to the broadcast of the game. Um, Football, Simmons, Lon Simmons, Don Klein, broadcasting, doing play by play on the 49ers broadcast. The Warriors, Bill King was amazing. I grew up in the 70s, got to listen to Bill King, got to meet Bill King. And when I was up in the various press box in the Bay Area, Bill was a mentor, just loved his entire, he had a sense of humor. He was as interesting and indelible with the mustache and the hair and the eyes and all the food interest and what he ate during broadcasts and all that. Folks, as advertised, Bill King had that absolute mark. He could have been great, and boy, if Bill King been in New York, he would have been even bigger than he already was in the Bay Area. Absolutely fantastic professional to the nth degree and all that, and same thing with Hank Greenwald. I think Hank Greenwald was massively underrated. I know he got a lot of credit and a lot of praise, which he deserved. in the Bay Area, mostly broadcasting the Giants, of course, did the Warriors. But I think Hank was very East Coast oriented, right? He could have fit in New York. And guess what? At the end of his career, before coming back to the Bay Area, Hank spent the late 80s. Remember when he left? In the mid 80s, went cross country to New York and did the Yankees on the radio in 1987 and 88. And Hank was just fantastic. That dry sense of humor, the very methodical play by play count, the excitement build up when he had and was, obviously giving an exciting moment, whether it was a home run, whether it was whatever, a triple, describing the action. Hank Greenwald was fantastic. I thought he was vastly underrated. I thought he was one of the very, very best, and so forth. Larry Baer didn't think so, but in any event, I'm not going to go there now. But the New York media, and particularly the sports media, I think it's just absolute Cadillacs versus Pintos. And that may be harsh, but so be it. Especially today, our media setup, especially the sports media, is just absolutely been put into reverse. It's the pits now, and that's unfortunate. You think a market, we're no longer the number 4 market in terms of television. We used to be 6th. Now we're damn near 8th. So our region is diminishing in terms of population, and we don't have the same quality in terms of our play-by-play folks as we used to. Look at the direct on basketball telecasts with that schmuck Bob Fitzgerald and the other guy who's basically just there to do whatever he does. Very, very boring, lousy. And I'm not going to go into particulars why, you know why. And so we do have pretty good hockey guys, and Randy Hahn and Drew Remenda and Dan Rusanowski and all that. It's a shame that hockey is the 4th sport now, but we do have really fine professionals there. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about that. New York media is in full force today with the ESPN account of the game later in San Francisco. And the fact of the matter is, New York, a town so nice they named it twice. And it is so nice, especially sports media, news media, entertainment capital, et cetera, pop culture, music, the whole 9 yards. But very, very, very much the case. The superiority is evident involving sports. Just the case. My opinion, of course it is. You may have similar feelings, you may not, but that's what makes it a horse race, as they say, right, folks? See you later, alligator.